Back during the first season of the pandemic when Halloween was kind of canceled and children couldn't go out or there was concern about it, well, a group of young people decided that they could solve this problem by creating a catapult where they would catapult candy from the roadside onto the front yards of children who were socially distancing. And I don't know much about catapults, but I do know that this isn't technically a catapult. It has some other fancy name.
It's
a trebuchet, I'm told, by my catapult consultant. But they said it was too difficult for the parents to understand what a candy trebuchet was, and so they went with candy catapult, and everybody understood what was going on. And so this trebuchet would launch candy for cute little kids to catch. Brilliant idea. Drive up on the back of a flatbed with a catapult and a bunch of candy and launch Halloween towards the children rather than what we usually do is launch the children towards the candy. Launching. We have these moments in our lives when we need to be launched from where we are over obstacles into some new place. And the great thing about a catapult is it has two purposes in warfare, either to knock down walls or to overcome walls to achieve some objective. But launching, it's a dangerous part of life. In our story today, there is launching that is going on. Advent, we can think of more than just waiting, but something's being launched into our front yard because we've been unable to go out and collect. God is doing some launching. God's launching this new covenant, this new understanding of relationship between God and humanity, which to this point was simply understood as a relationship between God and Israel, but now is being expanded to the entire world. This relationship launched over a wall to the entire world. We have Mary and Joseph, who are part of this launch. They're bringing this Christ child into the world, and that Christ child is the thing that God is launching. This Christ child is the covenant, the new relationship that God has with us. No longer written, but now in our hearts. God immediately with us. That's a pretty powerful launch campaign. And then our story today, where we have Elizabeth and Zechariah, who are celebrating the birth of John, little baby John, who grows up to be that wild figure in the wilderness, who is helping with the launch by preparing the way, making straight the crooked paths so that the people of the countryside and ourselves can find our way to this place to meet God in Jesus Christ. A whole bunch of launching that's going on. And like any launch, I don't care if you're older, if you're a young adult, like the people who made that catapult, launching requires a whole bunch of listening. The story that I read this morning begins this way. Now the time came for Elizabeth to give birth. There's timing for listening for where God is acting in the world. There was a time for listening for what is being launched. In your life, when you're getting to a point where you've got to make some kind of shift, when you are being launched into some new endeavor, or you're a young person and you're wondering, what am I going to do with my life? Where do I go to school? What's my career going to be? Whatever your circumstance is, this story provides us with some clues as to what to listen for so that we can launch properly. And I'll name these three things. We need to listen, like Zechariah and Elizabeth did, to the moment that is upon us. Not listening only to the past and distracted with the future, but just stopping and listening in the moment. And listening to what's most important to us. What are the values that are part of our momentum that we're going to use to launch into this new part of our lives? And of course, we need to listen for what our relationships are saying. And then, maybe then we can be ready to launch. So let me break that down even more. Again, maybe you're into something right now, wondering, how do I listen for where the Spirit is leading as I make some change or I launch into a new part of my life? And one way to understand that idea of listening for the moment, being mindful about the moment, is listening to what's going on inside of your body, to the wisdom of the body that God has given to you. What's happening in your body and what are you feeling? Too often we're just distracted by ideas, but we don't pay attention to those intuitions, to those fears, to those curiosities, to those feelings that are bubbling up within our bodies. And of course, we listen with our minds to what's going on in this moment. In the story that I read, you'll see that there is these references to being in the moment, and specifically a whole bunch of references to emotions. When I read this passage, I loved how much feeling there was in it. The neighbors and the relatives, they rejoiced. They were full of joy at the birth of this baby. And then, when they saw what happened with Zechariah, they were amazed. And then they were afraid. Those are powerful, motivating emotions that, like a compass, give us some direction. And they open our minds to where God may be calling us to go and to follow. I said earlier, listen for what's important. Listen to our priorities. In other words, listen to where's the essential in my lives? What's vital for me to be believing and doing? If you're thinking about some big change in your life, if you're trying to contemplate where you go from here, don't forget the values that have shaped you. Don't forget those things that your grandparents taught you, your parents taught you, that you learned from your kindergarten teacher way back. Don't forget your own experiences that have shaped you. Don't forget them. Don't let go of them. And keep in mind having a sense of purpose. We have hints of this in the story that I read. When you know what your priorities are, and you're faced with a multitude of opportunities, it's easier to be able to say a very important word: no. With all the opportunities that face us in this world, especially to a younger generation where the world seems to be to spread out before them. The entire world on the internet. So many opportunities. One powerful skill isn't necessarily saying yes. It's being able to say, no, that doesn't fit with what I believe. That doesn't fit with what I've experienced and how I've been raised. In the story, Zechariah's tongue is freed. Why was it freed? In case you didn't miss my setup, the angel visited Zechariah, who was a priest, while he was in the temple, and told him what to do, and to really nail down the importance of it, took away his voice and said, when your child is born, name him John. John had all of his relatives, all of his friends, all disagreeing with his wife and thinking they can do an end run around her and say, well, what do you want to do? And he remembered his experience, his divine experience, his moment in that temple. And it informed what he did, and his tongue was freed. And then the whole crowd, in the face of that, they had to ask themselves a purpose question. What is this about? When you're thinking about what you're going to do with the next part of your life, make sure that it has some kind of purpose, that it's not just blowing in the wind. Ponder, who am I to become? And maybe the God question will creep into that. And finally, there was the ask your relationships. Lean into your family and your friends. Lean into this community that raised you. And when you lean into it, you're going to get some good advice about how to aim your catapult that's launching you into the next part of your life. And this is where it gets hard. It's easy for me to say this, but what is the right question to ask? But ask those questions. What's the right answer that I'm getting back? In a world where the internet and AI allows us to ask any question and get back 1,000,000 answers, discernment for how to live in this world is about knowing what is the right question to ask. And your priorities, your experience is going to help you know what to ask. And how do I know what the right answers are? Don't go it alone. Lean into your loved ones. Ask them, what do you think the right answer is? And from there, make the right decision. Again, easy to say, hard to do, but that's what being a follower of Jesus Christ is all about. The story is about this baby John being born, and he grows up to be this wild figure in the wilderness, and he goes around shouting to people, the Messiah is coming, you better straighten things out in your life so that you can get to where you need to go. Prepare the way for Christ coming. Get the obstacles out of the way. He's talking about get the things out of your ears that are keeping you from hearing. Getting the things that are in your eyes that are keeping you from seeing. Get in touch with what's going on in your body so you can feel where God is leading you so that you can discern God's call in your lives. So you can ask the right questions. Who is this God who is calling me? Where is God calling me to? And you can hear the right answers. I don't know what that answer is for you, but if you listen, and you listen with others, maybe you can make the right decision to know what to do. Let's end with the candy catapult. Like I said, catapults are designed for war. They are designed to knock down walls or overcome walls. And when we're trying to make a difference in our lives, to change paths, it's easy to treat the challenge before us as though it is simply a wall to be knocked over. And where I'm getting to with this is when, and I feel this most for our young people who are growing up in a world that is telling them, when it comes time for you to figure out what you're to do in this world, when it comes time for you to show up on the stage of life and define who you are, the celebrated people use controversy. Create controversy. As people like an Elon Musk say, there's no bad controversy. And it's easy to look at celebrities and think, well, if it works for them, it's going to work for me. But controversy for controversy's sake is not a purposeful life. It is not a life that honors our experience and keeps connected with our relationships. Controversy for controversy's sake tends to break down those relationships, thinking that somehow I'll be freed from what has supported me all these years as I launch into the world. The same thing's true when it comes to being a follower of Jesus Christ. How do we listen for God's calling? Not be afraid to do what's difficult and what may be controversial, but avoiding presenting the idea of following Jesus Christ simply as creating controversy after controversy, but instead listening for the Spirit. After Zechariah said, Elizabeth's right, the baby's name's going to be John, and his voice was freed up, the first thing that he did after listening and making the right decision was he praised God. And the end of his song of praise is what I'm going to read for you as we end this sermon. By the tender mercy of our God, the dawn from on high will break upon us to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death to guide our feet into the way of peace. A new covenant. A new way of relating to God, which needs a new way of listening. Amen.